Introduced in its initial iteration during the 2340s, the Hideki class was a small scout or attack ship serving on the Cardassian fleet in many variants and subclasses in multiple roles over a long service life in the 24th century. The basic space frame of the Hideki was small by most standards, the ship being just 86 meters long, 60 meters wide, and 13 tall. Internally divided into two decks, the ship had a crew of some 20 to 50 persons, and had a variable speed and armament, depending on the specific variant under discussion, though 4 light spiral wave disruptors and a torpedo launcher were not uncommon armaments across most variants, with speeds ranging anywhere from warp factor 7 maximum all the way up to warp factor 9.9 in later variants. During the 2320s and 30s, the Cardassian Union fought a series of conflicts with the neighboring Talarians. In these conflicts, the large cruisers and battleships used by Cardassia were found often to be too large and ungainly to deal with the smaller raiders and destroyers favored by the Talarians, while also being too few in number to adequately patrol the entirety of Union space. Towards the end of this conflict, an extended period of smaller wars, the Union initiated a new doctrine which would guide its force structure for the next several decades until the end of the Dominion War. Abandoning large capital-grade warships for the time being, the Union invested instead in a force of smaller, less individually capable, though more numerous, mid-sized cruisers, the ultimate evolution of this line of which would be the Galor class introduced in the 2350s. A further ship type was developed as well. With the Union's scant natural resources and limited industrial capabilities in mind, the Union decided against producing a proper series of small frigates, destroyers, and patrol ships. While limited numbers of these ship types were produced, they saw very niche service and small production runs. Instead, a small scout ship, similar in role and size to the older Klingon and Romulan birds of prey of the last century, which would serve as a scout, skirmisher, attack craft, fast transport, and patrol ship, was developed. Prototypes had already entered service and field testing by the end of the Talarian conflict, with production quickly accelerating as the Union initiated a rapid modernization of its naval forces at the war's end. A1 versions of the Hideki, the assigned Starfleet designation for early models of the type, began entering service, as was mentioned, during the latter stages of the Talarian War. Although they were competitive with the ships of the Talarian fleet, the Union quickly realized they were badly outmatched compared to the tech levels of major powers. As a response, they introduced a steady stream of variants, with minor tweaks to performance, power generation, speed, shield strength, and weapons capability, these leading up to the A-23. Between the A-1 and the A-23, the largest individual batch would be 9 ships. This slew of variants would meet little success in making the Hideki the equal to contemporary Starfleet or Klingon designs, but did see the design steadily improved and Cardassian industry quickly improve as well. It would not indeed be until the C-3 variant of the ship that the Union would have a vessel truly competitive with the scout attack ships of the major powers. The B-series being dedicated transports, not warships, and thus do not significantly factor into the discussion of the ship's naval performance. The C-series would be the first to introduce a torpedo launcher to the class, albeit a launcher with a slower rate of fire and very limited magazine capacity, this being improved as the type production continued. However, the Union would continue to make gradual improvements, and by the time the Union found themselves embroiled in the border conflict with the Federation in the late 2340s and early to mid-2350s, the Union had probably the best light attack craft in the galaxy, in the form of the Hideki E3 and F1 series of variants. These ships caught Starfleet which had failed to introduce significant numbers of escort, destroyer, and frigate classes in recent decades in favor of a perpetual refit cycle on their Miranda-class space frames, was taken totally off guard and gave the Union a notable advantage in the small ship engagements which typified much of the war. Despite taking high losses during the conflict, the Hideki had proven itself to be a competitive and adaptable platform. And in the years of the peace between the Federation and Cardassia, a further number of variants were produced, with the H-series becoming standard. This traded the torpedo launcher the ship mounted for a new spiral wave disruptor cannon, which transformed the ship from a vessel whose best bet against larger ships was to keep at a distance and fire its torpedoes into one, which could close the range and deal terrific damage at close range, where a larger ship would have difficulty bringing its weapons to bear on so small a target. Huge numbers of the craft were in service by the time the Dominion War broke out, despite taking losses in the Klingon-Cardassia War and actions against the Maquis. During the war, the Hideki continued to prove itself to be a capable and very effective combatant, at least when used correctly. The Dominion tendency to put the ships within their own attack ship wings leading to very high losses among Union forces, as the Hideki lacked the agility and shield strength of the Dominion bug ships, as well as the suicidal disregard for self-preservation the vessel's pilots often displayed. As the war continued and the odds gradually turned against the Dominion alliance, the Cardassian economy began to seriously struggle, leading to severe shortages which saw the government shift production focus away from its cruiser arm and increasingly towards ever-increased Hideki production. This move alone showed the strain under which Cardassia was operating, but also highlighted its desire to keep in the fight, which it would do until the very end of the war over Cardassia Prime itself. Following the end of the war, the Cardassian military was seriously limited, with Klingon, Romulan, and Federation occupational forces overseeing the demilitarization of the Union and the restoration of civilian government. Only a handful of cruiser or frigate-sized ships, 150 in total, were retained, and these with torpedo launchers disabled and magazines emptied. However, Hideki production was continued, with the new L-series introduced post-war as a well-rounded patrol and law enforcement vessel. Today, the new government of Cardassia continues to operate the Hideki, though as the century winds its way inevitably towards a close, there are increasing calls for the replacement of the ship with a similar, though totally modern class. I hope you enjoyed this video. I always really liked the Hideki class. Actually, I like Cardassian ships in general, but there is very little official lore behind them, aside from maybe their names, although that's not really official. So this video takes more from my own headcanon than usual. I hope you enjoyed my take on this awesome little ship. Special thanks to my Patreons for helping to make this and other videos possible. Link in the description below if you want to support the channel that way, or just support the channel either way. That's the only way to support the channel. Aside from liking, commenting, and subscribing on this video. Professional YouTube outro done. Finished. Fin. Okay, I'll stop now. Bye.